Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ed Amoroso from Tag Cyber, and I'm here with my friend Kris Lovejoy, who is the Global Cybersecurity Leader at EY. And Kris, I want to welcome you to our discussion.
Ed, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
It's nice to connect up. Usually we're all in person, but I guess, we're doing this in July of 2020, so it's the usual sort of virtual, but it's not so bad. It still feels like we're together. So it's nice that we can match up. Hey, we're going to talk all about your career and tech. I'm going to pick your brains on some things that are coming and so on. But before we do, just take a minute and summarize some. You've got an important position there at EY. Why don't you share with us what it is that you do now, and then we'll go back and learn more about you.
Sure. So EY is as a firm, for anybody who's kind of familiar with the audit world, it is it's very big, and it's very sort of globally organized. So if you think about EY, it's got sort of the major organizing structure of the Americas. It's got EMEIA, so India and Middle East, Africa, and then APAC. And within that context, we have thousands of people that are doing sort of cybersecurity. And my job is really to help create sort of that sense of brand, to sort of define what is the sort of the mission, why do we exist. And for EY, our mission is all around this concept of security by design. And forgive me, I'm taking more than a minute, but it's just sort of an important context, I think.
No, this is
Our philosophy is, looking at the market and looking at, kind of one of the reasons why we're just not making the progress we should. A lot of it is because we feel that organizations are not really thinking about, cybersecurity from the beginning of any given project. It's part of the DNA. And so what we're trying to do is just kind of shift the market focus to be thinking more about security as a risk process, which requires security practitioners to think about risk within a business context, identify what to worry about, identify the technology assets, the people, the data that's sort of informing that process, and then to apply cost-effective controls to manage the risk across that process. Kind of that's our philosophy. And my job is to create the orientation of the brand around the philosophy, and then to ensure that we've got the right focus on the right services to make that real. Whether that be board education programs, whether that be application security testing programs, whether that be transformation of the governance management program, whatever that is, just really focusing the teams on doing the right thing for the clients across the world in a consistent and valuable way.
Well, that sounds like a big job and sounds like a lot of fun. Sounds like good. Well, tell us about yourself. You've been at this for a while. You've had a really interesting career. I'd love to hear how your personal journey.
So yeah, it's a weird one. So I started after I graduated from school, and coming from your area, I went to Lafayette in Easton, PA. But after I got out of school, I was working in public service. I was working for a congressman in New York, and then I helped run the city of Yonkers, believe it or not, during that housing desegregation time. And, laughingly, I always, I tell people I got so burnt out that I did what a lot of, sort of 20-something women do when they get burnt out, is they get married. That's like a good way out. So that's what I did. This actually story has a point. But I ended up marrying a Marine officer who was flying helicopters, and we were stationed in Jacksonville, North Carolina. So New York City to Jacksonville, North Carolina, big change. And when I got to Jacksonville, couldn't work. So I bored out of my mind. So I started becoming like queen bee volunteer. So I did a lot of volunteer work. I ran a soup kitchen, and I was managing, the most important program was this program for the spouses of deployed Marines. So this was during the Albanian, Yugoslav conflicts, Persian Gulf conflicts. And so what I was doing is I was trying to help the spouses while their husbands were deployed, and just keeping them basically alive. I mean, it's really hard, and people don't realize is that, when the spouses go on deployment, in an active, sort of war, if you will, the military takes a lot of money out of their paycheck. And so what happens is a lot of the spouses are left home, sometimes with kids, not a lot of money, and it's tough. And in those days, they couldn't call anybody. Like, there was no way in which, if there was an emergency, there was anybody they could talk to. And so we had some really extreme circumstances where women, at this time it was women, they got just pretty bad, some really, really bad, ugly situations. And I thought to myself, gee, if there was a way that I could help these spouses communicate with their husbands in an emergency situation, maybe I could help, we could help them. And so I read this book on the internet and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And so I got this idea that maybe we could use, believe it or not, FTP to start swapping letters back and forth. And so I went ahead and I said, great idea. I'm gonna go raise some money. And so I started raising money from like New York Life and Mass Mutual and all of the, sort of financial advisors. We call them financial advisors. Because who knew whole life, could be a financial vehicle, but that's another story for another day. Any case, I started raising money, put in some computers into the USO to enable this. I turned on the computers and I was like, well, where's the connect button? And like, how does this work? And English major that I was like, doesn't work the way I thought it does. And so I started reading about this remote access thing. And I was like, oh, okay. So there's like actually somebody on the other end has to like answer, It's like, okay, well, so got to go to the next step. Suffice to say, I started learning about, sort of remote access networking. How does this all work? How does FTP work? Lo and behold, I figured out I could actually read binary. Who knew? I was like actually good at like this whole concept. And so I got really into it. And the project, by the way, total failure, never got anything to work. But the positive side is I learned a lot about network computing. And so I started getting some jobs from some of the Mass Mutuals and the New York Lives, like, how do you connect me to the office in Raleigh? And so I started, like a cottage consulting career doing that. So eventually when we moved to DC, I got a job as a trainer and a network engineer for a company called New Horizons. And one of the first contracts they put me on was with the NSA. And so I was laying the lines for the internet and doing some training. And they said, gee, we really need somebody to deploy Microsoft proxy server. Back in the days, that was security. So I was good at tests. I was good at this stuff. So I took the test. And then all of a sudden, go figure, here I am, like the network security expert who's deploying Microsoft proxy server, at the NSA, go figure. And that's where it started. That's how I got into security. Then I left that company to join TrueSecure, which was one of the first internet startups. I was employee like number 2 and helped sort of define what is the offering. And it just kind of clicked. And, almost 30 years later, here I am. It's, back in those days, it wasn't like there was a program, to learn about security. You did it all yourself. And so, as I said, voila. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but that's the journey.
If you had married a plastic surgeon and moved to Beverly Hills, I wonder what your life would have been.
Yeah, I'm guessing it would have been pretty different. I was really planning on going to law school. I didn't, this was not in the cards.
Well, I've known you for a long time, and you're good at everything that you do. And none of this surprises me in the least. Now, how did you had a career that's involved some stops at some big companies. How did that come about?
Yeah, by a happy accident. It's funny because, people always ask, how do you manage your career? my career managed it for me. And I know that I should not be the poster child for how you manage your career. But, essentially it was, I made good friends, and it just worked out. So I went, I was at True Secure. True Secure was, was sold over to Verizon. And during that transition process, I left True Secure to join another startup with a guy named Joe Sander, who is CEO of a startup, a fantastic startup out in California. And he was tapped to become the CEO for a company called Console Risk Management. And he asked me as part of the due diligence to look at the tech. And I looked at it and I was like, this is really important. It was mainframe technology and it was doing security monitoring. And it was really one of the first SIEMs in the marketplace. And I've always been, the way my brain works is I'm kind of like, I'm good at seeing patterns in the chaos. So I looked at the tech and I said, wow, this is cool. I think this can become something really good. And so I joined the company and I was like sort of like the turnaround founder CTO, if you will. And we took the mainframe tech and we moved it over to the distributed systems as one of the first SIEMs and ended up selling the company to IBM. And so when we got, what I didn't realize, as much as I love Joe, I didn't realize that human beings could actually get sold as part of a deal. So yeah, something you learn. So I got locked up at IBM, which is the best thing that could have happened. IBM was absolutely wonderful, had great experiences. When I got into IBM, we were bought into the Tivoli unit. There's another wonderful gentleman by the name of Al Zoller. Al's one of the smartest, most just wonderful human beings. And he gave me an opportunity to become the product strategist. And at the time of IBM, when I got in, there was no security division. Security was part of everything. And so what he asked me to do is really just do an inventory of capabilities that IBM had in the security world and give him a perspective on what would a business look like around security. So I did that. And then just, we're just about to launch the product division when I was tapped to become the global CISO. And that's where we met. We were peers at that time, had lots of fun together because AT&T was one of our key supply chain partners, and lots of work we did together. And so I became the Chief Security Officer, Global Vice President of IT Risk. At some point, and I think this was very close to your experience, the board said, wow, we really like what you're doing. Can you take what you're doing and kind of turn it around 180 degrees and make your people billable? So, surprise, it was like one of those days. I went from, this to turning it around. And at that time, there was a gentleman by the name of Eric Clementi, who is the GM of the Global Technology Services, another wonderful human being, brilliant, called me like on a Monday, said, congratulations, tomorrow you start a new job, you are going to run the services division. Okay, so voila, I took that. This was still doing a lot of work delivering into IBM. But toward the end of my career at IBM, I was getting the itch to go start another company. So I decided to leave IBM because I kind of fell in love with the technology that I had seen being built by Northrop Grumman. It was a supervised machine learning tech that was really good at destructive attack identification. And this is one of and we can get into this, but as I'm looking down the horizon, what am I really worried about? It's a lot of these destructive attacks. So we built, so what I did is I left IBM and joined Northrop specifically to spin out the technology out of Northrop. So what I did is I helped, I found a buyer for the tech. We spun it out, built a company around it, and then very quickly sold that company to Comcast. So at that point, I joined Northrop. So I'm sorry, I joined EY. after we spun it out. So long story, all of this, with the exception of my move to Northrop, which was deliberate, everything else has been because I knew somebody knew me, and I just kind of floated. It wasn't like I was thinking about my career. It just so happened to work out, Kismet style. Like I said, not exactly the best way to manage your career, but it's worked for me.
Oh, it's been good. And now in your position at EY, I would imagine all that experience at NSA and IBM and NGC, that really helps. It gives you perspective on how these companies work.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is having that practitioner experience, sort of being, it's like, and we had experiences together, right, on, some breaches. And, it is, unless you're in the seat and you're able to really understand what a CISO faces every day, it's really hard, right?
Yeah, it's terrifying at times. Like people look at a CISO and think that it's this cold monolithic, position, but it's a human being who's going through career issues, might have sick people at home, they're dealing with these breaches, they're getting blamed for stuff. In many cases, the senior leadership team might view Kris, you and I, as being unfit for any other job other than the CISO.
Oh, yeah.
I'm happy to move you out. It's a very tough job, and unless you sit in the position, it's hard to really understand how tough it can be. But let's use that as a segue. Tell me about your wonderful work at EY. What are some of the key focus areas that you guys specialize in? I know the answer to some of this, but I'd love to have you share with the folks listening a little bit about the practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you think about EY and, sort of our heritage, we come out of the, largely the audit and the assurance sort of, and the risk function. And so, what we're, think about the heritage is where we're really good is we understand business risk, like at a macro perspective. Like if you're going to go start doing, business in, China or Nigeria or Brazil, we get it. Like we understand the sort of the financial environment, we understand the political risk, we understand, just the business issues. So we've got that context. What we also have, which people don't really understand, is we've got a lot of context in digital transformation and how digitizing business also introduces risk into the organization as well as benefit, right? So the upside and the downside risks of doing so. And so, if you think about, okay, so you've got that kind of context, where does sort of EY cyber fit? Where EY cyber fits is, I'd say, sort of is 5 core areas. One of the most important is just from a cyber program transformation. And let me reflect on a conversation I was having with a business leader just this morning for a very large manufacturing company in food processing. They deliver over 6,000 products to market in lots of different countries. And, one of the things they're thinking about is, cyber has largely been a very compliance-driven or crisis-driven function. And what they're trying to do is stop that, right? And think about cyber as, by design, how do I consider as I'm trying to roll out a new product, as if I'm trying to go into a new market, if I'm trying to acquire a new business, if I'm thinking about extending my supply chain, how do I need to think about cyber risk within that context? And so what we're helping them do is really just sort of reorient the governance and management system, soup to nuts, to better align sort of business to security, closing that gap. So that's one area where we're really focusing, financially quantifying risk, RACI models, all that kind of stuff. Second area where we're really strong and we're very focused is on the data protection, data privacy side. Again, there's a patchwork of requirements out there. It's a very process-heavy kind of function. So where we're really focused is on helping organizations understand what do they need to worry about from a privacy perspective. What are the controls that are going to be effective in managing, sort of privacy protection? how does the consumer fit into this, and what kind of processes need to be made available to them so that they can, sort of, actually make requests about where their data goes, and making sure it's expunged when they make a request for that, making sure it's being monitored, making sure, all of that's a plus, making sure that companies understand how they can monetize the data that they have available to them, because there is the upside opportunity to data as well. And what we're trying to do with our practice is make sure people understand it's not all about the negative. How do you keep people out of the data? It's also about how do you make data available so that it can be monetized and you can sort of garner those insights that are important. Third big area for us is around kind of architecture and engineering around business applications and it's like SAP. So a lot of organizations are now kind of transforming their implementations of SAP, moving to like an SAP for HANA, kind of model on like an Azure cloud. And so we're really thinking soup to nuts. What does that ecosystem need to look like? What do the controls need to look like? How does that factor into the supply chain? How do you manage the third-party risk? So kind of big ticket business application. I'd say the fourth area for us is really around identity and access, digital experience improvement. So again, a lot of business logic associated with that. So how do you streamline the customer experience? How do you control data? How do you control assets? How do you control OT equipment? Particularly now when you're beginning to move the OT environments into IT, how does that all factor together? And then last but not least is really more on the operational management, like next-gen security operations. Now, we're not really into the management of the, sort of like, we don't do firewall management, that kind of stuff. That's AT&T is really good at that. IBM is really good at that. It's not what we do. We're good at this layer above, right? We can help you define what does that need to look like, what kind of resources do you need. We can do the threat hunting, we can do a lot of the, the monitoring for you, but the management, the operational management, not our core DNA. We partner there. But that's what I'd say, those are kind of the big focus areas for us today. And like I said, my job is really to make sure that the teams are oriented around, it's very simple to me, forgive me, but it's build a offering that a human being has value, puts value in. Second is making sure that you deliver in a way that is just with a focus on customer excellence. You know this better than anybody. As a CISO, when we invest in services from a vendor, we're putting a huge responsibility on that vendor. And we trust that the vendor is going to give us the services we pay them for, right? And heaven help me, when you fail a customer, when you fail to deliver what they expect, you're putting their jobs in jeopardy. You may be putting their customers in jeopardy. There's a lot of really seriously bad things that can happen. And so again, my focus is on making sure that when we deliver what we say we're going to deliver. And then third, and this is probably the most important thing, I'm kind of like, this is my mom, being mom, is making sure that the people that deliver are passionate about what they deliver, right? It's not just that they have the skills, it's they also care. Because at the end of the day, if they don't care, the customers feel that. And so that's kind of like, we've got the 5 big focus areas, but my job is to make sure that they have, that they have value, that they're delivered with excellence, and they're delivered by people who really care about what they're delivering.
Wondering, have you seen any impact from the pandemic on the way people work in these areas, quantifying risk and doing data security, or is it more or less business as usual on the cybersecurity? What's been your observation?
I think there's a big change. I was just talking to people about this morning, and I'm beginning to see the indications right now. It's interesting and a little bit scary. A lot of the big, at least when you think about the work that we were doing, it was really more around these big digital transformations. And what's happening now is that companies now have just this existential crisis, right? They've stopped doing what they were doing. They've now shifted. They were at home. They're rethinking how do they need to communicate with their customers. You talk about brick and mortar banking, for instance. Okay, customers are no longer coming into the banks. It's 100% virtual. Okay, think about that. Now, all my tellers are working from home. I need to give them access. But guess what? My customers are now communicating with the tellers, not during the day, but they're communicating with them at night. So that's different. The mechanisms by which I convert a prospect to a customer have changed. The mechanisms by which I can upsell to a customer have changed. So fundamentally, the way in which I am working with my customers is changing. The way I need to staff my organization is changing. Omni-channel marketing has a different flavor, all that stuff. So what does that mean from a cyber perspective? Now what that means is the CISO had been marching down a path to enable the business in these sort of traditional ways. Now the world has shifted. These technologies have been rolled out without security. So now security, we've assumed new risk, and we're trying to reorient our strategy and budget to a new way of working. So all of a sudden, you've got this massive paradigm shift where CISOs are, it's like, they're spinning plates above their head. On one hand, they're trying to deal with all of the inherent risk that's been adopted by virtue of these new work from home, these new customer facing technologies. That's one plate that's spinning. The other plate that's spinning is they're trying to figure out how the heck they're going to reorient budget and strategy. And now the new third plate that's spinning is I've got the board and C-suite who are worried about attestation requirements. And they're coming in and saying, on one hand, I worry about cyber risk. But on the other hand, I worry about money. I don't know how much, I don't understand the value of the controls that we're implementing. And so I need you to tell me, why are we doing this? Like, what am I getting out of it? So we've got these three plates spinning all at once. And a lot of CISOs are like, I don't even know where to start. Right? And so and not to be overly provincial, but I'm an optimist by nature, and I'm saying, all right, you know what? Let's look at COVID as an opportunity. And the simple opportunity for me is, and I know I'm getting into a lot of different things here, but one of the biggest problems I think we have in security is during flush times, and you know this, you can't ever remove a control, because regulators and C-suites are always worried that if you take something out, you may introduce risk, right? So we just keep adding more technology, more controls. We never take anything away. So I think that over time, we've got, one of the problems we've got in cyber is it's overly complex. So one of the things I've been telling is, in order to deal with the spinning plate, maybe we should take a step back and say, these restricted budgets actually provide an opportunity for us. Maybe what we should be doing is saying, all right, how do I radically simplify and streamline my control environment? How do I, recognizing that in this, sort of time of existential crisis, we've got to shift our governance and management model to better align with the business. So how do I redo that? How do I rethink that in a way that's going to propel me forward? And so, I know this is a long-winded answer, but, at the end of the day, I think that the crisis is giving us an opportunity to really radically improve through simplification, or at least that's my hope. And I'm beginning to see some indications that these pressure points are forcing CISOs to begin to think this way, at least the forward-leaning CISOs that I'm talking to.
So is it reasonable to predict that maybe the rubber band doesn't spring back totally after COVID? Are you sort of optimistic that we'll come out of this maybe with more secure infrastructure and better services? And you think things will get better as a result of this, perhaps?
I'm hoping so.
Mhm.
I'm hoping so. I think at least from again, going back to the original sort of piece, that I started with, which is, security is a process. It's not a product, right? It's the process of understanding the business, understanding the key business processes, understanding the technology, the data, the people, understanding not just how to make it work, but how to protect it from failure. If we all get, like, if we can improve that process of managing risk, which I think COVID is forcing us to do, maybe there is hope that cybersecurity as a risk process will improve as well.
Well, let's certainly hope so. I think that I listened to you all day. For people who are interested in more information about the work at EY, is there a good place for them to go to the maybe website or something? Is that the right place to look?
Absolutely. So the first place to start is the ey.com is a great place. The other place, believe it or not, is go to LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I will, if you want to talk to somebody at EY, reach out to me. I will reach back out to you and make sure that you have contacts. But the global contacts are on the website. As I said, LinkedIn is another good place.
Well, listen, on behalf of the folks listening, and certainly my whole team, Kris, it was a delight to listen to your great stories and your advice, and really appreciate everything you do in our industry. Really do appreciate it. So keep up the good work.
And Ed, just my 2 cents. I want to thank you for what you're doing. Particularly the insights that you're giving us on the vendor community and that objective sort of analysis of what's happening. Honestly, I think you guys are disrupting the market in a really significant and important way for all of us. So again, on behalf of the security community, I don't know if you hear it enough, but thank you for what you're doing, because I really think there's industries out there that should be a little bit worried, because I think you guys are doing it right. And so I want to thank you for what you're doing as well.
Well, I think we just found what we're going to put on the new T-shirt. We'll put the. Well, thanks so much. Again, thanks for spending a little time with us. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks, Kris.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.